Alright, first of all, it may look like I'm in a bunker, but it's just my car. I covered over everything because it's so hot. It at least blocks the sun, and the shadow makes things cool down a little bit better. This video is in response to a couple comments that came from the Lewiston picnic table laying down shoes off video. I find those comments interesting. They're pretty rare, but they're good points. And I was thinking about what they were saying too. The cop has a perception. They have a standard that influences their perception. They can't take off their shoes, so why should the public be able to? So the standards that the cops are held to are constantly drilled into their head. I was in the military. I was put at a higher standard myself. So, and when I was on duty, that influenced how I conducted myself. And since everybody else in the military was pretty much on the high standard as well, there really wasn't a lot of conflict. There wasn't a lot of conflict of culture. There's no race in the military. Everybody's green. Everybody has the same culture. So there's a lot of similarities there, and people understood each other. But when it comes to living in public in various cities, every city has its own unique flavor and culture, how they interact with each other. Different ordinances are written for each city based upon how they're interacting with each other. I looked at this Lewiston ordinance. I've never seen a policy against using chemicals to extract worms from the park. That was the most interesting thing. I didn't see anything for picnic tables directly, but picnic table areas. Now that you can't. It didn't say monopolize. It said something about just you can't take over the area for long periods of time and exclude. It said something about not monopolize, but exclude other people. And that's another way to say monopolize. So what this cop was enforcing was the only policy that he's held up to. I'm guessing. And that's served as bias on how he approaches the public. And also, I asked how long he's been on the force. I didn't get an answer for that. A lot of police stations will tell you. But he's probably seen some patterns around just where he doesn't see people laying on picnic tables, so with their shoes off. So that became his reality. That was a conflict. People say there's this thing. Okay, let me go back. Every profession has its perceptions of what is. I think I wrote it down here. What is like a common culture, common sense. Everybody within their profession has these habits and repetitive behavior that just become secondhand nature to them. Common sense, common knowledge. Like a doctor would say, you always got to wash your hands. Your hands always have to stay clean. And in their profession, that's true. They have to. They can't be digging into bodies with dirty hands. A mechanic would say everybody should know how to check their oil. That should be common sense. That should be just something that people need to know. Every profession, they have a perception about what should be common knowledge. 2 + 2 = 4. There's mathematicians that say stuff like that's not true. You could find another answer to 2 + 2. I find that interesting. I'm not very good at math to have looked into that any deeper. But there are exceptions to the rules. So when this common sense, when common courtesy, common etiquette come into conflict between people, then maybe it's not so common. All right, maybe you have to recognize that there are different ways to approach things, and people get along just fine. Like me, I'm living in my car, and people might make the argument, well, you can't do that. That's against the law. Why was the law created? There must have been some conflict there. Not all cities make it against the law to sleep in your car, but some might argue that it's unsanitary. Well, I'm telling you, it's not killing me. All right, my sanitary levels are not bad. All right, so there's some situations where I've gone by RVs where it smells like piss. I don't think sanitariness is like when I was in Cook Hill, Oregon. They're saying, oh, it's an environmental problem. Well, we're in the ordinance. Where do they get that study from exactly? I found myself paying more and more attention to stains in the parking lots now, because I'm looking for I'm still dripping brake fluid, and I'm looking for my brake fluid. I'm like, well, look at all these puddles in every parking stall. People are leaking all the time. Oil and antifreeze and power steering fluid, whatever fluids in the car, it can leak. And you look in every parking stall and you'll see leak circles, leak puddles. So what's common with that? Actually, I got a little off track there. The common issues. I guess I was just trying to say that common sense can conflict. So when this cop says, "Oh, it doesn't look right," and I believe that the cops want to use suspect rather than subject. All right, they'd rather use those. They're quicker to use the term suspect over subject. But if they could change their perception with just that, just calling everybody subjects, that really takes away a lot of that perception of people being a criminal. Because when you want to describe somebody, oh, I see somebody over here, I see this person, this suspect, then it turns into a criminal issue. That's a perception. You say there's a subject over there. All right, more maybe in management, if you're running a store, you have a customer. Oh, you call him a customer. Or if you're doing something with a group and you're saying this subject over here is doing something different, and you want to straighten them out. The suspect over, I don't know. It's a perception, and that industry, that career that you're in shapes how you think of what's common, what should be common. Since it's your own policy, it's like, okay, if I can't take my shoes off, I was like, I didn't really think of it at the time during the video. That would have made for a more entertaining video. But if the cop was like, oh, your shoes are off, well, I'm like, I could have been like, well, your shoes are on. And people have said some interesting things in comments how I should reverse that response. Oh, are you a constitutionalist? And then I could respond, are you an unconstitutionalist? I'm ready for that one, actually. All right, I wasn't ready for the shoes off thing, and it's just my slow mind. I don't think of these things until afterward, but it makes sense. I'd be like, well, why are your shoes on? And then later I realized this cop's coming from the perception that his standards are higher, and that's invading on how he wants the public to be. He would be a lot more comfortable in a military base, I would think. All right, but people are going to argue that it is like a common courtesy not to put your shoes on the furniture, but we're talking about picnic tables and parks. All right, it's a lot different. These boards are used for decks. People walk on these boards. These boards are very strong on picnic tables. Picnic tables are decks, pretty much, just designed in a way that you can sit and eat. So they're designed to handle a lot of weight one person laying on it is really nothing. I don't know what the load standard is. There are heavier duty picnic tables than others, but the wood that's used is definitely a strong wood. I mean, I had an issue in Yelm, Washington, where they had this strip of metal put across the center of the picnic table to stop skateboarders from rolling across. I couldn't pick out the damage from skateboarders rolling on the picnic table. I've never seen a bar like that on a picnic table before. But I mean, this is maybe a matter that they could bring up at the city council. I mean, if anybody's watching from the city council, bring it up. Is this something that you guys, think that should be enforced with the park manager? The park manager would decide if that would be a reasonable rule in their parks. Would that conflict with the enjoyment of the park, but also keep it running in an orderly fashion? And that's another thing. It said that you should never interfere or question the cops' duties in the park. In this ordinance, it said you shouldn't interfere with the cops' duties while they're conducting traffic control. It didn't say, and that's the thing too, cops will stretch that law. Okay, just like what happened in Boise County, where Sergeant Giroux, who still works for Boise County Sheriff's, he argued cops should be able to demand to look at your ID at any time. He stopped there. Cops should be able to demand to look at your ID at any time. Idaho versus Godwin. That was it. He stopped there. But then later, when my public defender made the argument, he went further with that. Cops can demand ID when it serves a greater good for the public and less of a convenience, if it doesn't inconvenience the subject who's being demanded an ID. Cops can't, and then further also, cops can't demand ID out of their own curiosity. No, Giroux stops right at cops can demand ID from people at any time. All right, it's very convenient to do that. And if you just graze over this ordinance in Lewiston, all right, you cannot, like, the ordinance says something like you cannot debate the cop. All right, stop right there. You cannot debate with the cops when they're performing a function or performing their duty. But you got to read the ordinance. Performing their traffic duty. All right, the cop is there for traffic control, not just ordering people around, putting your shoes on and whatnot. But they'll stretch the law with that. And then you need a friend. You need to find a lawyer friend to set them straight with the wording and the interpretation of it, and how it's best aligned with the Constitution and all of that. And that's what cops are best at, is challenging your constitutional rights. All right, then you take it to court, and then you have more time to debate. When you're on the streets with the cops, you can't, like, go into your own chambers, have your own libraries, do the research. He makes this claim, you make a counterclaim, and then maybe a further claim in response. You don't have that time. You have that time for a courtroom, but not on the streets. It's a matter of safety, life and death, or getting an orderly flow, and all of that. It's in the moment. So it's, but yeah, the policies, like what other policies do cops have to follow that they tend to push on the public, and that's something that I haven't really figured out. The shoes thing is now clearly obvious from this video, but I question what else is there out there that they're trying to enforce that's actually their own policy, and it's just something that they think should be something the public has to follow as well.